Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. This week we take a look at the 1994 classic? 1996? When was this one released, Chris? I should have Googled that before I started.
5. I'm going in the middle, Dan. I'm going to say 5.
I'm going to say 6, I think. Let's have a look. Jumanji release date. No, not 2019. God damn it. Jumanji. Original. 1995.
Yeah,
Good guess.
Boom.
1996 in the UK. There you go.
Wait. Let me guess. Let me go further. April.
No.
Oh well, fuck you, Dan.
No, actually, to be fair, it doesn't say it exactly. It says its UK release date was February 1996. So that's a thing.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. Jumanji. What's your history?
It was November originally.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
It's close to April, isn't it?
Well, what I like about that is that they've kept that tradition up because they've all been released around Christmas.
Yeah.
Which speaking of Jumanji, next level out tomorrow. Like we didn't do it necessarily. Like it was one of the three films. I was considering 2 or 3 films. Jumanji was one of them. And then I looked and saw this episode would be releasing the day before, and I thought, well, that's a coincidence too. That's the universe telling me, what we should watch next.
And this is very much about the original, but even like what I think we'll stray into Welcome to the Jungle a little bit. So what's your experience with this movie, with the original?
I missed it in the cinema. Sadly, when I was younger, we didn't go to see everything because we were not the richest of families. So this is one of the ones that got put on the back burner, sadly, and I didn't see till it came out on VHS. And it had been, by the time I saw it, the hype train was pulling out the station, and I loved it. I thought I was genuinely pleased. I think there's always a concern, isn't it, when you're really excited for something that it might not live up to your expectations. But I think when you're a child, that you just go with it. Like I don't think that you know what I mean. I think that's something that happens to adults more than it happens to kids. And like when I finally sat down to watch it, it was like everything I hoped and dreamed. Like it was that.
I don't know. Young Dan was a bit wanky, wasn't
he? Yeah. More like middle-aged Dan is a bit wanky, and he's and young Dan's getting thrown under the bus. That's more what's happening. There's no way that young Dan went out into the kitchen after watching Jumanji, pulled on his mum's sleeve, and went, "Mum, that was everything I hoped and dreamed."
I can absolutely believe you doing that. So.
I definitely did not do that. No, but I was very much enthralled with the movie. I loved its tone, particularly, which is why I think that's one of the small failures of the sequels. I thought it had such an interesting tone, that it was this kind of almost like a horror film in parts, but for kids. And I'll be honest with you, as a kid, my favorite performer was Robin Williams. From the minute I put on Aladdin in like 92 or whenever that came out. Like I was enthralled with that man and everything he did, and I went back and watched his old movies, even ones that were far too old for me to watch, that I didn't understand. He was a huge part of my childhood. He was probably my favorite performer as a kid, and I basically just followed him to anything he did, even toys, which will come up on this podcast at some point because I've got all sorts of feelings about that film. That film is such a strange thing. So yeah,
I'd love to do Jack at some point.
Yeah, Jack, another great one. Yeah. So there's definitely a special place in my heart for Robin Williams, and this film is like a perfectly pitched Robin Williams vehicle, even though it wasn't necessarily designed that way, but it works really well for him. Going through it, like it's one of the films I think of very fondly from my childhood, but I think I do sometimes wonder how much of that is this film and how much of that is my love for Robin Williams in general just coming through.
Yeah, because I find it interesting and we'll get to it. I find it interesting you describe it as a vehicle for him. It's not his usual pitch, I would say. There's not like there's not as many jokes in this film, but I, even as a kid, the same as you, kind of found that tone quite intriguing. I remember I don't think we saw it in the cinema, but we had it on video. I think it was actually my sister's videotape. Like, I think she owned it,
Right.
and we'd watch it all the time. And I don't remember it being like. I don't remember it connecting with me the way, say Back to the Future did.
Sure.
But we certainly had the cassette, watched it. It's fascinating, this stuff. I love watching this stuff back and just realizing that the stuff you didn't really hit upon as a kid. I think I remember as a kid being vaguely confused about the ending and being like, how are the kids? But we'll get to that. But I remember being definitely struck by the horror of it all. Jess actually was frightened of the movie as a kid and was nervous to rewatch it. Because she was like, will I still be scared? I was like, I don't think so. And it's odd because I remember there's so much, animals and games and floods and all of that stuff. And it is definitely action packed, but I don't remember the heart of it that is very evident when you watch it as an adult.
Yes.
So I think it was an intriguing rewatch, and I definitely watched it. This definitely falls into the category of nostalgia and had it on video, if not, a particularly emotive connection. So let's get into it. There's some character stuff in this, isn't there?
Yeah. It's for sure. It's. I think that's obviously carried over from the book. Because it's based on a book, for those who don't know, and it's I get the impression some of that has come from that, but yeah, I mean, even the choice to cast, is it Jonathan Hyde? Is that the guy's name? Is
that the dad / the madman? Yeah, Jonathan Hyde, who plays obviously. His father, but also plays the man with the gun that comes out of the game, whose name has escaped me. Never picked that up as a kid, by the way.
What's
at all.
Van Pelt.
That it was the same dude.
You didn't realise?
Nope.
Oh wow. Okay. That's funny.
I mean, it was a kid. I feel like you're judging young Chris here.
Not judging, just it's interesting because I very much noticed, because there's even an allusion to it. I think I've got to look it up, but I didn't the text point out that it's somehow related to Alan specifically. Like, doesn't the text when they roll the dice and Van Pelt comes out, doesn't the text hint to that hit that
I can't remember. I just fuck it. All right, fine. Young Chris was just watching it. All right, whereas young Dan, oh mother. It was everything of my hopes and dreams, and I particularly loved the thematic use of the same actor that played the father. You see, he reappeared as the hunter because his unresolved relationships with him has been haunting him his entire life. Oh, Scone? This is what I assume your childhood was like.
Well, I mean, at that point, I was living in Ireland, I think, so I would have had an Irish accent. Number one, and number two,
your wankiness cut through accents.
Yeah, right. Fair enough.
That's why you don't have an accent now.
Gotcha.
What, you saying Ireland? Are you saying Ireland don't have scones? Chill out.
No, Ireland have scones. They just don't say it that way because they have Irish accents.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So I do think that's a really clever choice, though. Like, where I mean, he's under a lot of heavy makeup when he's Van Pelt. To be fair. So I could definitely imagine somebody not necessarily clocking it's the same actor. It's really interesting to watch because it's, as you pointed out, there's just so much character stuff in that you don't expect. And I did have a gap between watching it as a kid and watching it as an adult, but it actually ended much sooner than this because I rewatched the original Jumanji prior to going to see Welcome to the Jungle whenever that came out 2 years ago. 2017. So it's been 2 years since I've last seen it, so it wasn't quite as much of a surprise because I had the journey you described of being like, oh my god, there's a lot more character stuff in this than I remember. I went on 2 years ago, so it's interesting that you've had the exact same reaction. I think that says a lot about what your kid brain takes away from a movie and what your adult brain takes away from a movie.
Yeah, definitely. Without doubt.
Because if you ask pre-rewatching it Dan what's in the movie, he goes, oh, there's the spiders. There's the stampede, there's the monkeys, the and I name all the action pieces, basically the lion, and then I go, oh, there's a little boy that gets sucked into it at the beginning, and he comes back out, and he drags the other girl into it. I guess that's a thing that happens, but I don't think I'd have remembered much more. I
don't think I remembered the details. It was only when he was like, "It's not your turn," that I was like, "Oh yeah, the older woman's in this." Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think to be fair, it's starting to sound a little bit like I had a bit more affection for this movie as a kid, because I like those sort of wider strokes. I still remembered going into it. I think this is I don't think this is a I wore the tape out film, but it's pretty close. Like I definitely watched this a lot.
I wouldn't even like. When I say it was my sister's, if you were to ask me to name the films I had on video as a kid, I probably wouldn't even name Jumanji because it was like...
Right.
So I don't know how much I watched it.
Fair.
But I certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I suppose we should we start with how it starts? I mean, it's got a great... In any other movie, especially a family film, an intro before you get to the actual cast and main thrust of the plot that's as long as that... you'd be bored. You'd be so unengaged. It's such a long...
Well, what are you counting? Because it's bizarre. Because it's sort of... This film takes place over 3 timelines, technically.
Oh, yeah.
Are you counting...
4 if you're counting the alternate... If you're counting the alternate future, there's a 4th one.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I thought that was like brave because when it started, because I did remember we started with young Alan. So when it started with the 18, 19, whatever setup, I was like, oh shit, are we like, do we do this, then do that, and then do that? And we did. And yeah, it is long, but that's quite, he's...
On paper, that shouldn't work. If I was writing a script, Chris, and I asked you for your opinion, and I'd only planned it out, and I said, right, it starts in 1800s, then it jumps to the when did Alan Parrish vanish? Like the 70s, 60s?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and then and then we cut to modern day. You'd be like, damn, that's lunacy. And I'm like, yeah, but get this, at the end, we go to an alternate version of current day. In fact, no, about a year prior to current day. You'd be like, damn, what is wrong with you? I'd be like, no, I promise it'll work. It's going to be great.
On paper, it shouldn't work, but it does. It sets that tone, and it sets that quite like adventure story tone, which is quite nice. And the kid who plays young Alan, well, he's not a kid now, I assume, but he's really good. And actually, the kid who plays young Sarah is also really good. So you kind of, and I guess the thing with the trainers is quite amusing. Weird that they didn't necessarily call that back. They don't, as far as I remember, they don't like pat Carl on the back in the future and go, "Oh, well done." Do they?
There was a scene that was cut.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So yeah, I'll talk about that in the trove. But there are extra bits from the ending that were removed to give it a cleaner ending that maybe wrapped up. Like for example, that character. I can't remember which ones are, but yeah, that's the one that sticks out in my mind that I read about.
That's quite funny, and there's quite a lot of the film. The film's called Jumanji, and regardless of if you're sat there going, "Where's Robin Williams?" they do introduce the game right off the gate, so you are in there because of that, I think, and I think because the performances are so good from the actors involved in that early scene. So it is weird that a complaint isn't when's Robin Williams going to turn up when it so easily could be, and
I think that's because it's just so. I think it's an engaging story. I think it's well acted, like you said, and I do think that those initial scenes are you. I don't think anyone would object if that was the movie. Like it's because they make it so entertaining. Like you really get behind, you really understand Kid Alan's struggle, and it's a drama that you get invested in very quickly. forgetting the game for a second, many of us, I'd argue most of us, were bullied at some point in some form. That idea that he was people, but
me the last 6 years during these podcasts.
Yeah, you and me both, brother.
Have we been doing this longer than 6 years? Yeah, no, we haven't.
2012 we started.
Oh, God, what a depressing use of time. Carry on.
Chris is particularly feeling the time these podcasts take to record at the moment, because he's also in a play, and due to a series of unfortunate choices, we've ended up doing more podcasts than usual, like by triple, by accident, at the same time as he's doing a play.
I don't know what you're thinking. Well, Chris, why did you suggest the additional podcasts? I think we all know I didn't.
Yeah, but let's be fair.
I never once said no.
Well, no, there's that too, but it started very simply, which was we'll do rewind reviews in the weeks when we're not doing Steven Universe, and that made sense because we were already doing that schedule. Mm-hmm. Nothing But Static with Steven Universe is weekly, so the idea of we'll do rewind reviews weekly instead of Steven Universe when that's off, and then we were like, that's the same schedule. No problem. But then we went, let's get ahead on rewind reviews so at Christmas we don't have to record very much. So we added a bunch of extra recordings. Then, because of the streaming stuff, we had to add an extra Nothing But Static.
And to get in line with the 200th as well.
And to help us get in line with the 200, because we want the 200th to land on the statics. So that was kind of like a separate thing we chose to do, not putting it together with the extra recordings we're doing to get ahead of rewind reviews. Right. And then, as just a final kick to the nuts, they've announced Steven Universe is coming back.
Yeah. Well, they announced it. They released a trailer, which, if you remember, caused issues that day, and then they announced it was coming back. And then, but by that point, we'd already committed to do Jumanji, which has a release date that we're trying to, it's nice to align it with. So we can't stop. We can't pause rewind reviews to just do SU and be like, well, that's fine. We'll just do SU for a couple. Because
we also want to do Christmas ones of the rewind reviews.
Yeah. So it's a perfect storm. But anyway, so
that kid's his bullying and his dad's reaction to his bullying, the way I've bullied Chris by making him do 1,001 podcasts this month while he's also rehearsing for and in a play.
It's all good. It's all good. I've been enjoying it.
Alongside his full-time job and trying to find about 4 minutes a week to see his girlfriend, fiance.
Thank God I'm not planning a wedding.
Yeah, thank God you're not planning a wedding. Absolutely.
Let's be honest. I'm not really planning the wedding.
Yeah, I mean, I went along with that joke, but I also knew that was not a thing.
It's all good. It's all good. But the Jumanji was actually a pleasure to watch because it was a day that we did have a bit of time. Well, there was a rehearsal, but there was a bit of time around said rehearsal. But I think the kid is really great, and I think they build the suspense of the game. I think I think this whole script is really clever, and I will give props as well because I remember, just to say it now because we're talking about him getting sucked into the game. I remember seeing the trailers and stuff for the sequel and then being like, we pay tribute to Alan Parrish, and I'm like, how? And actually it's really clever that we never saw his life in the game, in the jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the sequel, spoilers for the sequel, the idea is that the Jumanji, the board game, is quite clever and adapts itself to what's ever popular. So it adapts itself to a video game, which is more immersive, and avatars exist. So they go into the game and see where Alan hung out.
It does. It always adapts to the time, but it's always about 10 years off.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like an old NES game in Welcome to the Jungle. And in this one, it's a board game, and she's like, ugh, board games.
Yeah, but don't forget the sequel does the same thing this one does. So the sequel doesn't start in 2000.
I remember.
In the 80s or 90s or whatever.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. So
Because actually, I think they do real spoilers, and we're jumping to the. No, we'll talk about that at the end. I think they do the ending better in the sequel, I must say.
do you think? Interesting.
Yeah, because it's so much cleaner. Because we'll talk about it now. In the sequel, there's a set of people from one time period and a set of people from another time period, but because their lives aren't so intertwined, they all go back to the right time, and you have that lovely moment where they see the older version, and they have that moment where he thanks her and all of that stuff, but he's able to go back to his time and grow old in the same timeline with nothing affected. They're able to go back to their timeline and will grow old or whatever. And it just feels a lot cleaner than this. So the kids don't remember because they've changed their lives, but they've changed their lives in a good way. But there's a whole adventure they didn't see, and like
there's no way around that because but there's no way that you can get around that because in this movie it happens in the real world, so you don't get this displacement thing that happens where they come out of the game and they're in a reality where they remember it. But it doesn't matter because it happened almost in another dimension. So the real world isn't affected. The real world, you had to clean up the real world because you ruined it with the game. And
yeah, I suppose,
and also in Welcome to the Jungle, they're not necessarily trying to finish the game that the guy started in the 90s or whatever. They're just trying to get out of it. And when they do, they get out with that guy, and everyone goes back to where they came from. So there's no way around in this movie.
He's another character. So and they can't select his character when choosing a character. So I think there's an element of they're finishing the game he started.
I see.
But I just think it's cleaner that everyone remembers the adventure. And the flip side of that is, but their parents are still alive. So that's great. And I'm sure they would choose to forget the adventure to have their parents. But I just, it's not as, I don't think it's as clean.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to it properly. The point I was about to before we got to sidetrack because of bullying was the storyline with his dad, I think really resonates and is very engaging. And I think whether you were bullied or not, like you feel for Alan Parrish because it's just something very relatable about that sort of like that the parent expecting maybe more of you than you can give, like having very high standards for you and like wanting you to achieve and be brave and and because they're trying to push you into with a bit of tough love, trying to push you because it's one of those things where this script it could easily come across as his dad's a monster. But weirdly, it manages to walk that line so that in the end of the movie, when he gives his dad a hug, like you really feel that it's very, very powerfully done, because you sort of like because they don't manage to set the dad up as a monster. You understand where the dad's coming from, even if you don't agree with him. And like it's my favorite element in which they manage to maintain that balance is he seems like a monster at the factory when he's like go out there and face him, and there's like 8 kids and they beat him up, but then you find out later the dad had no idea it wasn't just that one boy.
Yeah.
So from the dad's perspective, like he, it was just one boy out there giving his son shit. He's like, no, you face him, like, stand up for yourself. But obviously, it was like 6 kids or whatever.
Do you not think he changes his mind about the boarding school pretty quickly?
I think when he sees the affection his son has for him, he's like, sort of goes, well, maybe. I always thought it was a result of Alan's response, where he's like, maybe Alan does need to stay here because obviously he's, maybe he's a bit more sensitive, or maybe he's got a bit more, we've got a bit of a connection. Maybe sending him away isn't the answer. Maybe that'll put more of a chasm between us. I agree, it could be a little bit more implicit what that is. But I think that's just such a relatable and engaging story. So when you've got Alan visiting the shoe factory, like again, part of you should be going, where's the game? Where's Robin Williams? Let's get this fucking adventure started. The reason you're not saying that is because it's a very interesting concept all on its own, and you don't you're engaged in those characters on their own merit. So it doesn't really matter. Even when what's her face shows up, young Sarah Whittle. When young Sarah Whittle shows up, you get quite a quick vibe of what she's about as well. And again, investment in those characters from a young age, and it means that it doesn't just feel like a pointless tacked on flashback that's not really going to actually add anything to the movie. It really does feel like it's the setup for the whole thing, and you feel like, and it's because it's got the advantage of it being a flashback with the characters we're going to then grow up with. A lot of the time when they do these sort of like, flashbacks, they're a bit like the opening scene of this movie where it's two people I don't know and know aren't going to matter in the context of the movie, doing a thing that's setting up the movie. Because of the time travel element of this movie, and it's not really time travel as such here. There is time travel.
Forwards,
it's we're just talking about flashing back and then flashing forward. But because in the flashback here, it's the characters we're going to actually see in the adventure later on, and you know that. I think that helps. I think that really does help. Invest you in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's a really great opening sequence, particularly the way the game calls to them and he finds it like in the mud. I like with the drums. Such a clever idea that only the kids can hear these drums calling to them because it is it's a game and it's like just trying to like drawing them in. The bats thing is really cool. That whole sequence. I mean, the one that's on her shoulder is like obvious puppet a clock, but like fine, cool.
There's a bit of that in this. Some of the monkeys look a bit ropey, but I was quite surprised by how well, in general, the special effects stood up. I think it's basically anything where it's not a close-up, there's not the detail, looks great. The stampede looks great. The flood looks great. The spider, the wide shots of the multiple spiders looks great. It's just when you get like close-up that you're like, oh, that's puppetry or bad CGI
but I think the reason Jurassic Park still holds up. In fact, I think the special effects in the first Jurassic Park are better than the special effects in Jurassic World. And the reason that is true is it is a combination of puppets, real tangible things, with CGI things. Yeah. And I think where this movie sometimes goes wrong is committing to one or the other. I think the stampede feels very floaty because of the CGI. And I think the spiders feel very still because they're fully. That's not puppets, still, sorry, because they're fully puppets. And I think what this could have used maybe a little bit more of was some of the techniques they used in Jurassic Park, where it was puppets enhanced with CGI or CGI that has tangible grounding because they had a puppet on set. Even if the puppet isn't what we're looking at, there was a puppet on set to give the characters something to look at. But the actors, something to look at, but also like something to tangibly have weight and move through the scene.
But they do so much with the budget, and this is obviously a very broad statement, and I know the nuances of this don't apply. But with Jumanji, with Jurassic Park, once you've built that puppet, once you've got a dinosaur, you've got a dinosaur. With this, they needed flood, they needed the vines, they needed monkeys, they needed the stampede, they needed the insects, do you know what I mean?
They had a lot more variations and weirder things to figure out than the people. 100% true, without question. And I'm sure on a much leaner budget as well. I'm sure they gave Steven Spielberg a lot more money than they gave Joe Johnston, without question. Is it funny? This is our second Joe Johnston film review.
What was the first?
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he's the same director as he also did The Rocketeer, which is probably on our list, and then he ultimately actually went on to direct Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yeah, nice.
And he actually directed a Jurassic Park movie. Ironically, he directed the worst one, but actually, yeah, was it the worst one though? Was it Jurassic Park? Was it Jurassic Park? The island is melting, and now we're in a haunted house. Worse, I think it might have been.
Was that Fallen Kingdom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen any but the first, but from what I hear, Fallen Kingdom is pretty bad.
Yeah, I've not heard good. Yeah, not heard good. No, you're right to have not heard good things. It's not very good. And I thought I thought World was just functional. Like it was fine. It was like a functional soft reboot. Nothing too exciting. We'll see. Anyway, there's a third one.
What do you think of
we're getting a third one.
What do you think of the modern day kids here? I think I think the relationship with the aunt is played beautifully. And I think, but again, both of those child actors, I mean, obviously one's Kirsten Dunst, who, went on to to show that, that was not just a child acting. She's a great actor non-stop.
Yeah.
But great performances.
Sorry to interrupt your point, but I never fail to not, no matter how many times I've seen this movie, I never fail to not go, oh yeah, Kirsten Dunst is in this. Every time.
That's exactly what I did. I was
Every
like,
time.
That's Kirsten Dunst, right? And Jess was like, I think so. I was like, oh, Mary Jane.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable how much that surprises me every single time I watch this movie.
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
But they're like, what's amazing about that is, and it's something that I definitely only appreciated watching it this time, but like it's such a brave, when she's like, oh, they died, when she's joking about how they died to freak out the estate agent or the retailer or whatever. That's such a brave character introduction, because it's like, it's really dark humor, it's sarcasm, but it's sarcasm where the audience need to then realize it's sarcasm, and they need to feel like she's not a dick, and they need to get that's such an impressive piece of acting for a child to pull off exactly the right tone for what that scene and moment needs, and it's really impressive.
It's great. It's really good. Those two kids are characterized very quickly and very well.
Absolutely.
And very simply, like, they don't actually need to do a lot of work, because what they do is so effective. So they don't actually need to dedicate a lot of time to it. That one scene with her and the estate agent, you get her character perfectly, and it's that exact choice of scenes. It's honestly, it's pinpoint precision. It's like just that one little shot of her sniggering as she walks out the room is enough for you to know what's going on. And like, and then the brother, the idea that that he's kind of mute, like, which then you start questioning, how mute is he, because she's just lied about the other thing. But then later on, she says to him, you have to start talking to people at some point, so it's clear that the mute part wasn't a lie. So there's like, there's a in a few very quick scenes, we get a very good sense of these two kids and what their personalities are like. Slightly shifted when we get to the animated series. I'll be honest, but
I didn't even realize there was an animated series.
Oh, did you? Oh, I loved the animated series. That show was great.
So what did they change about the kids in that?
Their just personalities were different. They were a little bit more generic animated TV show kids. So
is the animated series the movie, but stretched over?
No
animation.
No, because the animated series is the board game is up in the loft, and every week they go in, and they get sucked in. They just go into the board game world every week, and Alan Parrish is in there, but in his weird grass thong thing and his beard, and then they go on adventures inside the world of Jumanji.
Oh wow!
And then each episode they end up coming across some of the different problem inside the world of Jumanji.
Yeah,
and Tim Curry is one of the voices in that. It's a great little show. No Kirsten Dunst. But people, it's funny how many things used to get turned into TV series. Like, a lot of people don't realize there was a Mask animated TV series.
Yeah, The Mask, Ace Ventura,
Men in Black,
Back to the Future. Men in Black. Yeah, it was a real thing for a while.
Yeah, but yeah, I
feel like this period. I feel like the '90s was the peak. But if you think about like those names, Jumanji, Ace Ventura, The Mask, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ended up with a TV show. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that was a real thing that used to happen. Anyway, they're really well established as two kids. So like, you're already invested in Alan Parrish, and then
Rugrats the movie, and the TV show.
Back to the movie, sorry, yes.
No, I said Rugrats the movie, that the TV show.
Yes, but in reverse.
Yeah, no, that was the joke. Anyway.
Oh, I see. There was a pause for that. That pause was me going, is he joking or is that a legit? Like, is he? Is he
of course. The film's called Rugrats the movie.
yeah, okay, you got me. That's fair. Oh, at some point we should watch that for this, because I honestly, I don't remember ever coming away from a movie with like a more positive opinion. Like, when I was a kid, when I left the cinema from watching that, I was convinced that was the greatest movie I'd ever seen.
Well, I actually remember, and this may be making me look quite wanky, but I remember even not being able to necessarily phrase it like this, but I remember being wowed, even at a kid, that they'd managed to take the Rugrats and structure a proper movie out of it.
Yeah, that was it.
And it had a
Again, I remember
ABC plot. Like, wow.
The scale of it. That's what I remember noticing the most. They actually managed to convert it to the scale and feel of a movie. Yeah, it was, we should watch that at some point because I remember that movie being brilliant, and I've definitely not seen that since. No, that's not one I've come back to as an adult. So at no point will I'm gonna have to. Yeah, we'll have to dig that out. That'd be fun. Anyway, So I mean, for those who don't remember the premise, I guess we should probably be clear because I don't know if we've really explained anything yet. So basically, Alan Parrish, bullied as a kid, finds a board game, rolls the dice, and it's like some weird board game that's magic, and it sucks. He gets sucked in until someone rolls 5 or 8. The other girl had already rolled, and she'd gotten a hint from the game that her, I guess, punishment for having the balls to roll the dice. It's a very vindictive game. Was these bats. There's you get like a cryptic clue every time you roll it, and then you get something related to it, and the clues get shitter as the game gets on for some reason. That's part of the rules, I think. They're really carefully written for the first few, and then later on it's like, it's wet, and you'll be wet, and it's a monsoon. Don't worry about it. It's a monsoon. There's a monsoon
this
coming.
is something that's pointed out in the Honest trailer. Essentially, everything has to why don't people roll and then fucking run? Because everyone,
because it's always something shit.
Yeah, but it's always something shit. But every clue contains some sort of reference to the fact that they need to run.
Yeah, then run. Yeah, agreed. So Alan Parrish rolls and gets sucked into the game, but previously, the other character whose name immediately escapes me, Sarah Will. She'd rolled, and it had given her a clue about bats just before she. So Alan's stuck in the game until someone rolls either 5 or 8, and then the bats all burst into the room. She runs away scared. And then we cut to the present day, where basically Alan Parrish is this missing kid for years and years and years, and Sarah Whittle grew up thinking she was crazy and going to therapy and stuff like that. These two new kids find the game, start playing, and then realize, well, first of all, one of them rolls 5 or an 8. Alan Parrish comes out an adult. I suppose in a weird way, that's a really depressing story. So no wonder they have to reset it at the end, because when you think about it, Alan Parrish's dad couldn't go on because his kid was missing, and he didn't. Oh
yeah, they're absolutely right to reset it.
Yeah, they had to reset it. There's no other way around it.
It's not the resetting; it's the fact that the resetting means time is changed, so Peter and Judy don't remember.
Yes, but I don't know how you get around that. I can only see you have one or the other, and you have to have the relationship with the dad restored. I think, and that's what's important.
Which is what I mean by, I'm not saying better's maybe the wrong word, but I think the way the sequel does that is cleverer.
Right, fair.
Because the sequel gets around it because they don't intertwine. Yes. The two stories so much.
Yes. So, the two kids in the modern day are rolling. Alan comes out of the game because one of them rolls a 5 or a 7 or whatever it is. And then they go to roll because basically they've discovered that if you finish the game, everything goes away. And the town is now being plagued by the things that came out of it when they started playing, lion, mosquitoes that are making people sick, that sort of stuff. So they decide to keep playing because they know if they finish it, everything that's come out of the game gets reversed. So they go to roll, nothing happens, and they realise that they're actually still playing the game. They continued the game that Alan Parrish started many years before, and it's actually Sarah's turn. So they have to go out and seek out Sarah, and then adventures crack on from there. It's basically them playing through the game, dealing with the consequences of it.
So let's
go on. No.
Let's talk about the Sarah of it all, because I find her as a character fascinating.
Yes,
because I can't decide whether it's a clever decision to make her a psychic or not. Because I feel like they did it so that if anyone thinks too hard about... Well, she seemed to... For someone that had been told her entire life that she'd imagined it, she seemed to take the news pretty quickly and accept it. And there is resistance at first. But she pretty quickly starts to play the game and gets on board. And maybe they made her a psychic so people can go, well, she believes in mystical things. That's what that is. But then equally, she she did get to the point where she did believe she didn't. It was a figment of her imagination, and she blocked as a child Alan getting murdered. So then to have her become a psychic and be very open to that sort of more, the unexplained a bit more. Yeah, I don't know. I just found that because it doesn't directly play into the plot, I didn't know whether it would have been better to have her relieved and be like, oh god, I knew I was right, or have her like, nope, this is my imagination. But then how long do you do that before it starts to interrupt the action? I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. I think balancing Sarah's grief and Sarah's post-traumatic stress in a way, and balancing how quickly Sarah comes round was an interesting one. I think they harper on the idea of her leaving a bit much. I think Alan's a bit unfair. Like he got sucked into a game, loads of bats appeared. She probably didn't think, you know what, I probably need to keep playing this in order to release him. Like she wouldn't even know that, because I think he rolled his dice and get the heart. No, it was after. I suppose it was in the clue. But yeah, I just found, I don't know what I would have done instead, but I don't know for sure if they 100% nailed Sarah's character to make all the things they wanted to do believable. But I'm not quite decided, so I might be wrong. I might be convinced otherwise.
I'm leaning to it functions. I think you've maybe taken more from the job choices than maybe you were intended to. I don't think it's anything to do with she's open to mysticism or anything like that. I think they just thought, what job is the sort of job someone who's not got any skills, like something that someone can just sort of like get away with doing to earn some money, because her life was so ruined by this game that she probably didn't properly go through school anymore, therapy, all this stuff, it probably ruined her life in more ways than the obvious. So I thought they were just like, what's the sort of job an unqualified person could arguably just do? And anyone can just say, I'm a psychic, come pay me money and I'll tell you your future. That's a. So I thought they were just getting at, she wasn't particularly a successful person because the game had ruined her life too. So she was scraping money together by just being a psychic, and also it was also more about her shedding the because obviously she's the girl that came out of that house screaming about board games, sucking a boy into it, and bats and all this stuff. And she's almost become myth because the exterminator guy, so some of the bats remain in the house, and they call an exterminator in the early parts of the movie, and they show him what kind of bat they saw, and he's like, that kind of bat's only from Africa. And then he goes, except there was this one girl who saw a whole bunch of these back in the 60s, but she was crazy or whatever. And like that was a nice touch. So the psychic thing is also, I think, a little bit about she could rebrand herself and the town wouldn't know it was her. So she's like Madam Psychic or whatever. She's got like a psychic name, and that's why when they knock on the door and they say Sarah Whittle here, she's like, no one lives by that name, because she's obviously trying to get away from like. So not only did it ruin her life in the practical, obvious way of she was psychologically tormented, but it ruined her life because she was at such a young age, she probably then didn't get a proper education out of it because she was in and out of therapy for years after. Then as a result, she couldn't get a proper job. But then on top of that, the town all thinks she's crazy. So she's like ostracized too. Like, so the psychic thing to me was just a quick, easy answer to what does she do for work? Like, considering that her life was probably ruined that way. And also, how is, like, if she's, like, legend in the town, why is she not being ostracized all the time? Well, she's kind of changed her name. That was the way I saw that. In terms of her coming round to it, I actually thought they managed to get away with a little bit of both. Because she does immediately go, this isn't happening. But thankfully, the reality is, Alan Parrish has stood in front of her, and he knows things that only she would know. He even says it back to her, until the dice read 5 or 8, in the jungle you must wait. And it's clearly him, because he knows he's describing that night. So they get to have their cake and eat it too a little bit, because you have her deny it initially, because of course you would. You've had your whole life everyone telling you you're crazy, but it's undeniable that he's physically in front of her and knows things only Alan would know. So then you've got the great joy of then just getting to very convincing. I found convincingly have her go, well, this must be real, like because now he's stood in front of me, you know.
Yeah, that's fair. I see what you're saying.
So for me, I thought they handled all that really well. I also loved the way they played her reluctance to play the game. Because Alan Parrish had already been reluctant to play, and it took a lot of convincing to get him to come back to play it. And then he's the one who has to convince her because she has the connection to him. And then later on, she finds out that he didn't want to play at first too. And the moment they exchange following that is brilliant. It's very well done.
Yeah, it's quite funny, that moment as well.
And the way he plays it and gets her to play as well, when he says, you know what, no, it's fine, don't worry then, you don't have to play, just hand me back the dice. And because he's still a child, that's what I love as well. They characterize him brilliantly. He's still a child. It's great, because he holds his hand out for her to put the dice in, then he pulls it away and he goes, hey, like a kid would. You're like, ha, gotcha. You know, it's brilliant. It's so well done. And obviously Robin Williams is maybe the perfect actor to play a man-child like that. No, I don't think anyone else can capture the sort of behaviors of a child, but in the package of a grown man, quite like Robin Williams.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So it's a great moment, and I think it really functions. And I totally can see what you're saying though, because I do think like her character isn't when all the other characters are established so cleverly and cleanly, like Judy and Peter, and then obviously Alan like had a lot of time dedicated to him. You know, by the time you get to Sarah Whittle, the adult version particularly, the movie's trying to move at a clip at that point. So I guess she probably gets a much less precise setup. You know, the others all feel like laser-sighted sniper shots, whereas her introduction feels more like a shotgun. It does the job, but it's maybe not as precisely woven into the story like the other characters are. So yeah, I can totally see where somebody would come away feeling like her character wasn't quite as cleanly done. I think in a lesser movie in general you wouldn't notice, but because all the other characters are so well set up, she does feel like the odd one out, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I also don't think it's wrong to say that if you don't notice it as a kid or you don't notice it when you know that you're going to analyze the podcast for an hour and a half, it's probably not really an issue.
yeah, I would argue that's probably true. Carl, is it Carl? Is that the character's name?
Oh, brilliant. I think he's fantastic. I think to be honest with you, I think some of the funniest stuff is with him. A lot of the stuff Robin Williams is given, and it's not a criticism because I think it's right for that character and that story. But he's not as over the top as he is in Mrs. Doubtfire. But that Carl character gets to be the exaggerated comic relief, and every time he's on screen and just suffering at the hands of this board game without even knowing what's actually going on.
Yes.
Is just really entertaining. And he gets a bit of pathos, when Alan reveals who he is and stuff.
Yes.
I thought that was a brilliant performance.
So for those who don't remember the character very quickly, Carl works in Alan's dad's shoe factory, and when he's a kid, he basically accidentally costs him his job. And then in the future, he's worked out fine for him. He's a police officer. He seems like didn't ruin his life. It was probably more of a blip than anything else. But he's a local town police officer now, and he basically keeps bumping into Alan in the present timeline and thinks he's basically a crazy guy. And then these kids' crazy uncle. And then obviously all the Jumanji stuff is causing chaos for the police because there's been a stampede and the monsoon and the monkeys, and so basically they just you're right. It's like whenever they want to give the main characters time to reset, so the movie doesn't feel like it's going too fast, because that would be the thing. It would make the movie's pacing be right off if every time because in reality, that's the thing. In reality, as soon as you've gotten away from the stampede, you're rolling the dice again.
Yeah,
because you're trying to get through it quickly, right? So to avoid that question popping up, and the reason you don't feel that question quite so much is because they cut to him and you're not thinking about it, and then when you cut back to them, they're resetting up and ready to roll the dice again. So it feels quite immediate, But in actuality, what you've done is you've pasted over it with these sort of scenes that take place elsewhere in the, and it also gives it more context as well. For it's not just that they're experiencing it; it gives you a wider visual of like how the town is reacting to the events of them playing this game.
It gives the hunter characters something to be distracted by, and it allows you to bring in the aunt and
Correct.
get a bit with the aunt, because they could have. It's quite a cool decision that they dedicated, especially when obviously in the future, because the parents are alive, we don't deal with the aunt. So you could have had the aunt just appear at the beginning and then make the phone call maybe, but then disappear. Like you didn't need to bring her back. But that character would have looked like a right arsehole to just abandon these kids that have already been through so much. And it gives the actress a chance to play with some stuff as well. And, her reaction to the stampede is all really funny. And then with the floods. So I think it's a really clever use of her.
One of my favorite jokes in the whole movie, and it's not even really a joke, it's like a visual gag, is the whole stampede going across, just keep cutting back to her face and then the stampede.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And then it's the stampede comedically petering out, and it's like that one lone rhino that's lagged behind the rest of the stampede. It's like just trotting behind. So the comic timing on that is absolutely pitch perfect.
So speaking of the stampede, then, so what's your favourite action piece then? Because you're right, at that point in the movie is the different set pieces. I think mine's the monsoon. I think that I think it's not dependent on any form of, well, other than shitloads of water. It's not as dependent on, the vines are cool, but they suffer a little bit from the special effects. I think there's a real genuine sense of jeopardy. I think the solution, whilst maybe in terms of the physics of it all, is a bit a lot of water rushes out quickly from that small door, and the threat is resolved quite quickly. But I think by that point, the house is so destroyed, and just adding that shitload of water. I just think it's really cool visually. There's a genuine sense of jeopardy, and they build the solution from the moment those two characters, Carl and the aunt, are heading to the house. You've embedded the answer to that solution, so it's not someone finding something or rolling again or whatever. Which none of the solutions I think are bad, but that one. I just thought was really well written. So for me, it's Monsoon. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's tough because I love the monsoon, because the monsoon brings a lot of things together. Because the monsoon comes with crocodiles, then Alan's swinging on vines, and there's the lion. It all sort of culminates around that point. So these are a really great moment, and it's tricky because I think the best thing that comes out of the board in terms of what adds the most to the film is Van Pelt. I think because Van Pelt, at the end of the day, Van Pelt is he's final boss, isn't he, really? He's the final thing Alan faces down. And I actually, that idea of something coming out and recurring like that is really cool, because not many of them get to come back. So the lion only comes back for joke scenes, and then the one swipe at Alan towards the end. The mosquitoes are mostly used as the reason they play the game. The monkeys come back a lot, but usually for fun gags rather than threat.
Them stealing the police bike and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, shooting. My favorite one of the monkey ones is when they shoot through the police car. Yeah. Because they get into the police car and Alan sees them, but at this point the police officer, Carl, thinks he's crazy, and he's going, "Nah, get out of there!" Nah! And then he looks at him and he just goes, "Monkeys." It's so good. It's like a great moment. So I do. So I mean, to be fair, a fair few of the things recur. They're actually quite clever at making sure to remind you that certain things are now out in the world, because then every time they do that, you're remembering why they're still playing. Yeah. So that's very clever. But I think Van Pelt being the recurring thing, he leads to a lot of the best moments. And I do genuinely love the Van Pelt puts the gun on Alan. It's Alan's turn. He says, "Drop him." So he drops him. And he knows that's going to roll.
So good.
And then he sees his piece move to the center. And then he says, any last words? Jumanji. Come on, that's great. That's so good.
It's brilliant. And well, not only that, but Sarah, given the storyline about Sarah not continuing the game, the fact that she jumps in front of Alan to take the bullet, and she took his life from him. Yeah, she took his life from him, and now she's making the decision to not do that again, or to save his life. Beautiful. That's fantastic. That final scene.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like the one when I was a kid, my favorite was the spiders because they scared me the most.
Yeah, they use them really effectively to combine them with the quicksand floors. I think that's great.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So obviously the movie's pace starts to ramp up, and they're rolling the dice every 10 seconds, like towards the end of the movie. But that just creates this build up of things going wrong. So there's the earthquake splits the house, but before that, he gets sucked into the floor. When he gets sucked into the floor, he gets trapped, and when he gets trapped, that's when the spiders come. So they're having to play the game and be defended from the spiders, but they can't move. So they're having to like roll the dice from like his teeth or something, or like Sarah does maybe. Because she can't roll with her hands because they're stuck. Like and then obviously the kid has to go get the axe so they can fight off the spiders. It all really builds up. So I guess my favorite set piece is, if it isn't the monsoon, it's that, because I like the way that builds up. But if we're just talking about my favorite thing that comes out of the game, I think Van Pelt, for sure. Like, he adds the most to it by miles, and it's nice having something that can talk to them. I know that sounds weird. Yeah. But that final moment where he comes to kill Alan, and this idea as well that he's like this, this hunter that lives in Jumanji, and Alan's kind of like the most intriguing thing he can catch, because Alan's probably the only other human in Jumanji.
Yeah. Apart from Nick Jonas.
We'll get to that in a sec. Actually, I've got some thoughts on that, but in terms of but it's amazing how good all the set pieces are in this movie. I like the one where they're in the car and the mosquito's trying to get through, and it's like it's played as a joke, but it's actually very tense. So he goes, "Don't worry, it can't get in," and then it starts poking its thing through the car's like fabric top. It's an open top car normally. He goes, it's okay. This thing is only a couple of inches. It's not going to get in here. And then it goes to the front. It starts cracking through the glass. And then he's like, "Don't worry, that's not going to get through the glass." And then he like knocks the button, and the thing keeps coming. Thing starts coming down. He's like, "Okay, like, we better get out of here." Like, that everything like is done really well in terms of the action set pieces. It's surprising how much thought went into them. They're not just. I mean, at the beginning, one or two of them are, whack the thing away and then run. Like, that. There's a couple at the beginning, like the first time the mosquitoes show up, she just hits them with a tennis racket, and then that's kind of like the solution, and that's kind of like, that's kind of lame. But the idea with that is they're not really there to be a threat in the moment. They're there to be a long-term threat.
Yeah, I think they get away with it, and I think it's as you said, it's ramping up the types of problems and ramping up, at the beginning you can swat something away, but also, that's the cause of the town being rushed to hospital. So it's a threat, but not necessarily to them. It sort of flies out of the house and stuff. But yeah,
there's more of those ones at the beginning. Like the stampede immediately just runs off and it's gone. The monkeys, they're in the house. The kids don't solve that problem. The monkeys just then leave. The lion, they just lock in a bedroom. Like the early stuff, they solve almost too easily, you could argue, I suppose.
Yeah. So that takes us to the ending. So I love the ending. I do love the ending. I know it's maybe come across that I don't. I like Nick and Judy to remember Peter and Judy. Is it Peter and Judy?
Peter and
Judy. Yeah. Whilst I'd like Peter and Judy to remember the adventure, the fact that. And it's not quite. I can't remember them saying their last names, but there is the graveside scene, which at the time when Peter's just like, "Our dad was in advertising," you're kind of like, all right, bit random. And then you realise, watching it as an adult, by having that information, Alan's been able to find him and bring him there and can save his life.
Gives him a job.
Yeah, but it gives him a job in order as well, I think, to keep him there and, like I say, save his life. saved their lives. That's a beautiful notion. That's really great. So yeah, do I wish things like Carl were in there? Yes. Was I as a kid a bit confused? Yep. But it makes complete sense, and I think that I will forgive. Whilst I don't like that they don't remember, and think it's cool in the sequel that everyone does remember, I do think you get the reward of the kids getting their parents back is great. You just wouldn't necessarily pick that up as a kid, I don't think, because of there's the ski thing and the whole no, but yeah, I think it's great. Yeah, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't mind that they don't remember the adventure so much at all. It's a pretty traumatic experience for everyone. And I was actually kind of surprised they even had Alan and. In fact, I think the bigger problem is, and they try to cover it, is Alan and Sarah are like fully grown adults back in kid bodies because they've got all their memories for inexplicable reasons. Like utterly inexplicable reasons.
Yeah, they kind of try and have their cake and eat it,
yes.
don't they? With that,
yeah, because they have Sarah say, "Oh, I'm feeling more like I'm starting to feel like a kid. Like my brain's starting to,
and she says before I completely forget what it's like to be an adult, and then she kisses him. But you is their names whilst they can't remember being an adult, they remember Peter and Judy, and that's enough to keep their names a memory, but maybe they don't remember he doesn't really remember the 25 years he spent in Jumanji, and she doesn't really remember the 25 years she spent growing up. But they by having them save Peter and Judy's parents, it suggests that it's a bit muddled what they do and don't remember.
Not just that. I mean, they save themselves. Like Alan gets to grow up with his dad, and and her life isn't ruined. Because when you think about the situation when this movie's going on, it's quite a dark premise. Like Robin Williams Alan has been trapped in a game for 25 years. Everyone thought his dad murdered him, and he was sort of driven out of town, essentially, by the sound of it. Sarah is this outcast that didn't have a normal life again. I talked extensively about her earlier. Judy and Peter have lost their parents, and they're so young to have gone through that. That's really horrible. So you just look at it and go like, well, wait a minute. Like at the end of this movie, all of that is fixed. Like every bit of that, and I really love that they took the time in the future to show Alan on the phone with his dad saying he's going to come see him for Thanksgiving or whatever. To show he has that relationship with his dad at the end. I think that's really important.
It is. There's an element of does Alan either? I suppose they don't state how his parents died. So is Alan in the knowledge that the parents might be about to die, or does he get them good medical, or maybe they died in an accident as well, or they died from a broken heart because of Alan, so therefore Alan being back stops them dying? There is that shadow.
Oh yeah, because they're dead in his timeline, aren't they?
They're dead, and they've only recently died, so they're dead sort of around the time that we then cut to.
Yeah, sorry for listeners. I just knocked my mic. That probably didn't sound very pleasant. Apologies.
But I think if they I think it's right to not go too deep into how they died, because you can if you want to go, oh well, they didn't take care of themselves because of the Alan stuff, so they drank a lot or whatever, or they were unhealthy, and maybe that was it, and because Alan was there they weren't. Who knows? So you can fansplain that, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I would 100% agree. Shall I get to the triv? Oh, let's do overall opinions. Let's do, is this a recommend? Do you think this holds up? That's what.
It's definitely a recommend. I think not only does it hold up, I think you get. I mean, spoiled for listeners now, but you get a different. It's like watching a new movie because you see things you didn't realize. This more than any of the films we've done, I've seen things I did not see as a kid. And that's there were no layers to Space Jam that became evident when rewatching it. Although Toy Story was amazing, there were no layers to Toy Story that I didn't realize were already there. Whereas this, all the action adventure stuff was just as good as it was when I was a kid, and there's a whole lot of character stuff that I hadn't even spotted. So absolutely recommend.
Yeah, I think this is. I'll be honest with you. I think this is much better than the sequel. I think the sequel is very good, but they're different movies. Those sequels are tonally like a completely different thing, and
I'm not saying that it's not better. I know I've brought up the sequels a few times, and I've been very complimentary on the sequel. I think the sequel made a lot of clever decisions, and I think I think the sequel's just a fun romp. But I think what's impressive about the sequel is I went into it going, how are you gonna pay tribute? How are you going to update this? How are you going to make it make sense? And it did all of those things. And it's just, I think the sequel does something completely different. And I think if one of your biggest positives of this film is its tone, the sequel does not have that tone at all. The sequel changes that tone. But this isn't, about comparing the two. But I thought the sequel was great.
The sequel is...
I'm not saying it's better. But I do think it's great.
The sequel is great, but you've got to detach it from this, because what I liked most about this film as a kid, and the thing that captured my imagination as a kid, was this almost alien jungle, this mystical, weird jungle that had like these specially weirdly intelligent monkeys, these vines that had certain properties. Like Alan's like, you want to watch out for the yellow ones because he's obviously been there a long time, and they're like, they shoot spikes at you and like all this weird stuff. Like this jungle, just the impression you got of what the place in the game was like from the things that come out of it in this
is a lot rawer than the jungle you see in the second one. Yeah,
correct. The one in the sequel, it's just a normal jungle. It's just a normal Earth human jungle. And that's really disappointing because I liked that it was like a jungle but like on acid. Like, I loved that premise. And that version of Welcome to the Jungle is the movie I wanted to see, sadly, was them going into a jungle where trees could come alive and eat you, or some other weird stuff could happen, because it's a video game and it doesn't matter. So I was very disappointed how pedestrian the jungle was in the sequel. Although I do like in the sequel they have the idea of NPCs, non-player characters, like Rhys Darby's character keeps repeating the same lines. Like that's a funny idea, even if I was deeply disappointed with how the Jumanji jungle was actually portrayed in that movie. And I mean, deeply doesn't even cover it. Like, I was honestly gutted, doesn't it? Like, such disappointment.
But I think they did the same thing. I think they focused on broad, big action pieces and character stuff. And I think the character stuff was great.
Yeah, but it's such a shame because the first one had that stuff and it had that weird tone. And it's such a shame.
The problem is, although it's a touching tribute, the problem is the Alan Parrish was here bit. Because if the Alan Parrish was here thing wasn't there, then you could go, well, when the game changed to a video game, the jungle changed as well. But you can't do that because of the Alan Parrish was here thing. That implies it's exactly the same jungle. If they didn't have that, then it's a cleaner reboot almost. You don't even need to view it as a sequel. But because of that, you do view it as a sequel. But it pays tribute to Robin Williams, and I can see why you make that decision in order to do that. So yeah. I don't have as big a problem with it, but I completely agree with what you're saying. I painted, when he described the jungle in this, I didn't think of the jungle from Welcome to the Jungle.
Not at all.
I pictured a different jungle. So, yeah.
And that's such a missed opportunity, because why would you choose to set Welcome to the Jungle in such a pedestrian jungle when this movie gave you on a platter the insanity,
I guess
the intriguing, the mysterious, the scary. Like, why would you then go such a pedestrian route with it? I don't know.
I mean, it's still fairly scary. I wouldn't want to be stuck in that jungle, but yeah. So I do see what you're saying.
Yeah. Let's get to the trailer.
Maybe there'll be more of that in the new one, because obviously the monkeys are back and all that sort of shit. But I expect it would just be a very similar film to the first.
Yeah, personally, I've not really seen too many of the trailers for the second one. I'll see it, but I'm not excited for it. Like, because the last one was totally solid, but nothing special. So
I'm not. It's not a film that I'm like, I'm definitely seeing that in the cinema.
No. Anywho,
truth.
I honestly think the charm of that sequel was purely the cast.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by they chose to focus on characters.
Yeah.
You make the jungle pedestrian so that you can do a lot more with the Rock and Kevin Hart's characters' relationship, and the Rock and Karen Gillan's and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
And
also that idea of people being
future-proofing.
in bodies that are like the opposite of them. That's like funny.
Yeah. And you future-proof it, because now you can have Kevin Hart do a Danny Glover impression.
Yes.
Then in the next one,
Sure.
you can have him do another impression and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I do worry that the sequel's going to suffer from adding more characters, because you've got more characters than avatars, and you're like, well, where are the other characters and avatars and all of that sort of stuff? But yeah.
Well, we'll soon find out, won't we?
Yeah. Well,
Out tomorrow.
cool.
Cinemas
Right,
everywhere.
Triv for this one.
So, the trip that I thought was the most interesting was that Joe Johnston, the director, had reservations about casting Robin Williams because of his reputation for improvisation. He feared that he wouldn't adhere to the script. So, when you were talking earlier about the joke rate and that it was a bit different to what you were expecting, basically the reason for that is that Robin Williams, when he read the script, understood that it was a tight, structured story. And when he got to shooting, he generally filmed the scenes exactly as outlined in the script.
Wow.
Which is why it doesn't have that normal Robin Williams frenetic and just like spitting out jokes left, right, and centre, because he stuck to it, which I think is really
What a
good.
clever man that man was. Fuck.
What was that, sorry?
I just said what a clever man Robin Williams was. Fuck,
Yeah, he understood when to do it and when not to. He 100% did. And apparently there's only one or two improvisations in this film, usually in his scenes with Bonnie Hunt. So there you go. Apparently before it came out, people would ask him, what's this Jumanji movie you've got coming out? What does it mean? What does Jumanji mean? And he would always tell them it's an island in the Caribbean and that they should book their travel there early because it'll become popular after the movie came out.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. Apparently, he's admitted since as well that he didn't need to act startled in any scene where Van Pelt was shooting at him, because apparently the blank gunfire was extremely loud on set. That is genuinely him jumping out of his skin every time the gun goes off. So that's good.
Awesome.
Speaking of improvisation, I love this one. I've just lost it in my... apparently, Bradley Pierce, the actor that played Peter, improvised the line, "Of course she'll know where Sarah went. She's a psychic."
Yeah. No.
That's a really good line, considering that little kid
a
just
very
came
funny
up with
line,
that
yeah.
in the moment. It's like one of the funnier lines of the movie. Like, he came up with that in the moment. That's great. Yeah. During a guest appearance on Clive Anderson, his UK chat show All Talk, Robin Williams told a story about filming the scene where he was wrestling a crocodile. He said he got a little carried away and he thumped the crocodile with his elbow, forgetting that there was a man inside the suit. He heard a voice inside the crocodile yell, "Hey!" in protest. That's great.
Awesome.
Bradley Pierce underwent 3 hours of applying prosthetic makeup for his scenes as a monkey for about 15 to 20 days of the shoot. But apparently he enjoyed going through the process and he quite liked wearing the makeup. So there you go. It wasn't a lot of actors talk about the trauma of being stuck in that makeup, and there was a part of me when I saw him in the movie and I went, oh, that's a kid. Like, people talk about, like, was it last week or the week before, 2 weeks ago, we did RoboCop, and all the horror stories of getting into that fucking suit.
Yeah.
Like,
I do.
Part of me had that in mind when I watched this, and I was like, oh god, I hope this kid didn't have to go through, like, what was it, 11 hours of prosthetics?
Yeah. Nuts. I do have a lot of love for adventure movies where the characters, like, it's all set in one day, or the characters are all wearing the same clothes throughout. Like, I don't know why. I just really enjoy that genre. Like, you know, Shaun of the Dead, this. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Shaun of the Dead and this. Those two movies go hand in hand. I think I saw a box set once with the two of them in it together.
But you know what I mean.
No, I know
like,
exactly. I know exactly what you mean, but it's just the two examples you chose happen to be from opposite ends of that spectrum. It's just quite.
Yeah, I just couldn't think of any other example. Road Trip. I don't know.
Jesus. Oh no, I know what you mean. Anyway, So when asked in a roundtable interview whether Parrish's father was like Robin Williams' own father, the actor admitted some comparison. He was stern. He was a bit stern and kind of elegant, Robin Williams said. However, the actor likened the disconnected relationship between Alan and his father to the fractured relationship between his dad and grandfather. The wonderful thing about my dad is he would never force me to do anything, because something had happened early in his life where he didn't want that to happen to me. He had to give up his dream, Williams continued. His father had been very wealthy, and when he died, they lost all of that, and he was forced to work in a strip mine in Pennsylvania. When I found something I loved, my dad saw that, and that's what makes it nice when you connect on that level.
Oh, wow.
So basically, it sounds like his dad had a dream, but when his grandfather died, his dad had been forced to work in a mine instead of pursuing that dream. The freedom he'd had from his money was gone. So Robin Williams' dad helped him pursue his dream.
Cool. Nice.
There you go. Very nice. Robin Williams was beloved by the town of Keene in, I think, New Hampshire. That's where they filmed most of this. He was even presented with the key to the city. And after his death, the Keene residents crafted a makeshift memorial of flowers and candles below the parish shoe sign, which still stands today.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome.
So the parish shoe sign is still there.
That's fantastic.
That's great. Love it. If I'm ever in New Hampshire, I guess I'll go have a look. Scarlett Johansson auditioned for the role of Julie Shepherd. That's pretty interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before she started auditioning for trees and stuff. Huh.
Yeah. Before she was playing trees. The board from the film recently sold on eBay.
Very, very deep, very specific joke that. But the people that got it will get it.
Yeah, everyone who got that joke is having a fucking good time.
Everyone else is like, she didn't play Groot. What's he talking about?
Yeah. Just type Scarlett Johansson trees into any search engine and find the joy of her being mildly insane. I think when she's older, like when she gets to that sort of like legendary actor age, you know, like I'm trying to think, like, you know, like the Ian McKellen age, where like she's gonna be batshit crazy.
That'd be amazing.
I think she's going to be like a lunatic when she's an old sort of wizened actor. She's going to be great.
I see the point she was trying to make, but it was it was a bizarre example.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Anyway, so the Jumanji
my
board.
tongue as I sneezed then.
It's all good. The Jumanji board from this film actually sold on eBay for $60,000.
By who? How was it? A crew member or something? How did the person get it?
It's a good question. I don't know if they just acquired it from like a previous auction.
Yeah, okay.
But it was screen used.
Wow.
So it was used in the film.
Fair play. Well, they only had one board.
It sounds like they had a couple, but one of them was sold on eBay and went for $60,000. Yeah, I imagine they had a couple.
Cool.
That might come up in this trivia somewhere. We haven't even talked about the book really, but we'll come back to that in a minute. When the gun shop owner asks Van Pelt if he's a postal worker, around the time of the movie, there'd been a lot of news stories about postal workers going crazy and shooting up workplaces. This actually shows up in a few films from that era. There's also jokes about that in Jingle All the Way. I don't know if you recall. About the postal worker with the bombs and stuff. Like, there's a lot of that. But apparently that's where the expression going postal goes. So there you go.
I found that joke didn't age brilliantly. It's probably the only joke in the film that I was like, ooh.
Yeah, I would agree. Which is, again, thankfully this is another one of those movies where I couldn't really find anything that was problematic in a modern age, which is lovely. Nope. I like it when that happens. Roger Ebert criticised the film for being marketed as a family film but being too scary for children. Even Robin Williams himself would not let his children watch it.
Yeah, I get that complaint. I do get that, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, it's pretty scary for a kid's film, for sure.
Yeah.
I would agree. The dual casting of Jonathan Hyde as both Alan's father and antagonist Hunter Van Pelt is similar to the custom in adaptations of Peter Pan, where Mr. Darling and Captain Hook are often played by the same actor. Robin Williams later went on to play grown-up Peter Pan in Hook, 1991. I love that movie with all my heart, and I cannot wait to cover it on this podcast.
I'm not 100% sure I've seen it.
Oh, mate, you've not seen Hook?
I think I have tangentially. I think it's been on.
Right.
I don't remember actively sitting down and watching it.
Rufio. I'm so excited. Let's watch that again. Let's watch it right now. No, I'm kidding.
I remember like a Christmas it being on in the background, but yeah.
It's a great movie. Great movie. I think that's a Spielberg, isn't it? That's a Spielberg movie.
You know what I might do at one point? I remember one Christmas just sitting down and getting enthralled by The Great Escape. I think we might have to do The Great Escape at one point.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's the one I've not seen in a very long time as well, so I'd be absolutely up for rewatching that.
But anyway, carry on.
Kirsten Dunst plays Bradley Pierce's older sister. In the film, she's noticeably taller than him, which is why that works. But in reality, they were only about 6 months apart in age. They're about the same age.
Oh, wow.
She was 13 at the time, and he was the same. There's 6 months in it. So there you go.
Fair play.
It's just a height thing. He was just a short kid. I'm sure he had a growth spurt later. There you go.
I mean, not here to judge.
Yeah, there you go. This is fun. The final Christmas scenes were shot on location in Vancouver. Located near Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver is not known for snowy winters, as it's normally rainy during that season. Jumanji's production crew had to shovel fresh snow down from the mountains in order to film outside of the mansion.
God, just fake it.
Mate. That's nuts.
No.
This might be one of my favourite pieces of trivia.
Seems to be a lot of effort to me. But,
that's ridiculous. I mean, look, I respect the crew's efforts, but that is mad. There was a rumour that an elephant was killed during one of the stampede scenes, but no live animals were used in the movie at all. It was all CG and puppets, so that was bullshit. There was literally not a single actual animal in this movie.
I love when rumours like that just come out of nowhere. I remember there being a rumour that in the season 8 finale of Friends, Rachel was going to die during childbirth.
Jesus. It's a sitcom, people.
I know. Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
Jesus. To film the Rhino Stampede, the crew rigged a hydraulic ram to launch a steel rhino that they made through the wall of the library. It was then obviously digitally replaced by the herd of animals. I think that was the ropiest CG.
Cool.
Was actually the moment they come through the library.
I don't know. Some of the monkey close-ups are.
Oh great. Yeah, some of the monkey close-ups are really bad. Yeah, you're right. yeah. Okay, fair. But of the stampedes for sure, like because when they're outside, they look pretty good in the open spaces.
Yeah.
In that tight space, it feels like the library should be more destroyed than it is.
Yeah, that's fair.
They come through quite a small hole, but they're quite big. I don't know, the physics of it don't quite work for me. But I like that they went to the trouble of like throwing a real steel rhino-shaped thing through the wall to make it sort of give it some tangibility. It's probably good. So all the people that were. Let's play a game, Chris. All the people that were up for the role of Alan Parrish. What names keep coming up when we do these lists on all these films?
So Jim Carrey.
Who? Sorry.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey, not considered actually on this one, but he has been on all of them so far, I think.
Tim Allen?
No. Okay.
Chevy Chase?
Yes, Chevy Chase.
No, go on. Name him. I can't remember.
Tom Hanks, Bruce Willis, Dan Aykroyd, Kevin Costner. My favourite one here, because he wasn't famous at the time, Bryan Cranston.
Kevin Costner would have been... Bryan Cranston, who went, guys, can we get the voice of Zordon to do this? That's amazing. Kevin Costner would have been a weird one, I think.
Yeah,
anyway.
Very strange. Sean Connery would have been strange as well. Harrison Ford, Mel Gibson. Put my finger down my collar and move that around a little bit. Michael Keaton, Bill Paxton, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Did they consider him for every movie in the world at the time? Was he that
Probably
big?
at that point, yeah.
That's crazy.
You know what, though? So out of some of those, Schwarzenegger's better than some of those other names.
Michael Keaton would have been good, I think. Tom Hanks would have been good. I don't think Bruce
Keaton
Willis
would
would have
good.
been.
No, I don't think Willis would have been. I don't think Costner would have been. Chevy Chase probably could have done it.
Yeah, maybe. It's hard. I can't. I picture Chevy Chase more as modern day Chevy Chase now because of Community. So I find it a bit hard.
Yeah,
to
well, you've got to
imagine.
remember National Lampoon.
That's what I'm
Chase.
trying to like picture in my mind. Not quite Fletch, not quite Community, like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think Dan Aykroyd would have been a good fit either.
No, there was one name that I was quite interested by. What were the other few?
Harrison Ford,
like, last.
Sean Connery.
Yeah, I think Harrison Ford would have been all right, although he's never been quite that comical. Like The Fugitive, Blade Runner, Star Wars. He's very grumpy.
Yeah, I mean he plays himself. I mean he's a grumpy guy. I kind of
yeah,
love
and
him.
I can't remember him. I can't. He's not really done a more comedic role, has he?
Not off the top of my head, he hasn't. No, but that doesn't mean he hasn't. It just means I can't think of one. But yeah, I mean, I think that would have probably functioned. But like, yeah, I think putting him on set with kids if he's like that grumpy, like,
Yeah.
probably not a great idea. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, that's all the various people that could have played that role. I think there's a couple I definitely would have been interested in seeing, for sure. I don't think Bruce Willis would have been right for it, but Michael Keaton I think is the one of those I'd most like to. Oh, maybe Bryan Cranston or Michael Keaton. I'd like to go to the alternate reality where those two happened and
Yes,
watch
but
those movies.
I still think Williams is the perfect choice, though.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, I wouldn't change it. But if I got to just visit another reality and just spy on a version of the movie, I'd choose those two. My curiosity would choose those two for sure. I'd be just interested to see how the movie turned out with those. Now, obviously, there's a book sequel to Jumanji called Zathura, a space adventure, which became a movie. And it's a spiritual sequel to Jumanji, directed by Jon Favreau.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it came out in 2005, and I remember watching it under the impression it was a sequel to Jumanji, and it is really good.
Oh, fair play. What is it? The same thing, but in space?
Basically. So when John Calley took over as Sony chief in 2000, one of his priorities was a Jumanji sequel, and despite getting one with Zathura, which he made in 2005, he still pushed for a direct Jumanji sequel and then got it, obviously, in 2017. So that guy was trying to get Welcome to the Jungle made, essentially, since 2000. The closest he got prior to 2017 was Zathura.
I tell you, that last shot of like the game washing up on the beach, I was literally like, it's insane that it took so long for us to get a sequel to Jumanji.
Yeah, considering it was a hit too. Like, my understanding is that it was. Yeah, I should look into that. Really,
ripe for a sequel.
Yeah, really was.
The fact that it took so long to make one that they had to change the game is nuts.
Well, that's what's interesting to me is that, like, so the Zathura book, as I understand it, is a direct sequel to Jumanji book, but in the movies, they're not connected at all. It's just tangential storytelling. Like, it's like a spiritual sequel. But couldn't they have just made it a Jumanji sequel in the same way that it's a sequel in the book?
Yeah, well, I don't know what the sequel in the book looked like, but I assume just more people play the game.
Yeah, but it gets the same way that it adjusts itself in Welcome to the Jungle and becomes a video game. My understanding is that it's the same game in the book becomes a space themed game instead of a jungle themed game.
Yeah, you could have done, but I think you gotta. You don't want to. So many reboots fail because they're just the first movie again, and I think stuff coming out of a board game, it's just the first movie again. I think the movie was
really good.
No, well, yeah, and I've not seen it, and so yeah. But in terms of a direct sequel, I think they made a sensible choice to do certainly the Avatar stuff.
Actually, this is some trivia that's related to that. So, though the movie's plot differs greatly from that of the book in which it's based, the ending of the film is extremely similar to the book, in which the game is found by two young children. In the book, the two children who find the game at the end are named Walter and Danny, and are the main characters of Zathura, A Space Adventure. So there you go.
Cool. Nice.
Kirstie Alley was apparently considered for the role of Sarah, but instead chose to do a film called It Takes Two.
Wise decision, Kirsty.
Yeah, I like Kirstie Alley, and I actually think she'd have been a very good Sarah Whittle, but I do really like the actress we got. I think she's great.
I think she's brilliant.
Bonnie Hunt, she's wonderful, so I wouldn't change it. No. Yeah, she's one of the good ones. Last bit of trivia before we get on to a new segment, which is shit trivia, because I've found one of the worst pieces of trivia I've ever read in my entire life, and I cannot wait to tell you. But before we do that, very quickly, the 2017 reissued Blu-ray features 2 never-before-seen deleted scenes that were due to appear at the ending. The first scene features Carl as the new president of the shoe factory discussing a new shoe with Alan and a co-worker. Excuse me,
Great. Love that.
Wish
we had it.
that. Yeah, it's you can watch it, I guess. It must be online somewhere. The second one shows the extended version of the Christmas party and shows Judy and Peter opening their presents, in which they get a brand new pair of shoes named Jumanjis.
Oh, nice. That's nice.
Yeah. I do kind of wish the Carl scene had been included, for sure. But
yeah, the Carl scene, and I kind of wish the second one from the description as well, because I like the idea of Peter and Judy are a bit weirded out by Alan and Sarah. I like the notion of them forming a relationship as well, and us getting a hint that that's going to happen.
Yeah, because that's the thing I suppose I was a little sad to lose, was not so much their memory of the adventure, but more the idea that they wouldn't continue to be friends.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Can I read you the worst single piece of trivia I've ever had to read in my life?
I cannot wait.
In a scene, Alan, Sarah, Judy, and Peter get attacked by spiders. Kirsten Dunst, who plays Judy, went on to play Mary J. Watson in Spider-Man.
That is bad trivia.
Which is followed by the way, Scarlett Johansson's future Adventures Infinity War co-star Karen Gillan would play Ruby Roundhouse in the sequel to Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Scarlett Johansson auditioned for Judy Shepherd, but lost out to Kirsten Dunst. So the connection there, Chris, is that
the movie business exists.
Yeah, so Scarlett Johansson auditioned for Judy, didn't get it, and then years later she would start a movie with Karen Gillan, an actress that would end up starring in a Jumanji sequel. That's not trivia.
That's insane. That's insane trivia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. You want to hear what's coming next, Dan?
Yes, for sure. Because so we've kind of made the pre-agreement that we're going Christmas, because the next two are going to air. Yeah. Are going to release.
Well, first of all, we kind of summed up Jumanji. Definitely recommend. Watch it as an adult. It's got layers. Cool.
It's got layers, and also it's on UK Netflix.
Yes.
As is the sequel, so watch both. Why not?
Yeah, why not? And they're probably a good double bill, I reckon. Tonal shift, as we've said, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the hardest part of watching them together. Will be the tonal shift, but
Yeah, but I think that slightly depends on how much the tone of the first one appeals to you.
Yes, how upset you'll be with the tone shifting. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, 100%.
Right. So. It's a bit of a weird one. So, Christmas. I was thinking about Christmas, and I'll be honest with you, the contenders were the one I've chosen. Well, when I thought of the one I've chosen. But the initial contenders were Jingle All the Way or the Santa Claus. I didn't want to do the Santa Claus because Jess and I always watch all three, and I knew I'd be watching it separately to her. And I don't know. I kind of wanted to save Jingle All the Way to watch it actually at Christmas, and I don't know.
For those wondering, we're recording these kind of in advance.
Yeah, and I probably would have gone with Jingle All the Way, but also Jingle All the Way I think is quite tonally similar to stuff we've done recently. Certainly, it didn't feel particularly different to Jumanji. Not that it has to at all, but I was like, not sure. For some reason, I just wasn't sure on Jingle All the Way. I think to be honest with you, we're doing a Christmas movie day, and I just wanted to save it for that. So I was like, well, what is the actual Christmas film apart from the Santa Claus? What is the actual film that I associate with Christmas and have what is the most nostalgic film for me? For Christmas, what do I remember watching as a kid at Christmas time and adoring? And Dan, the next episode of this is going to be the shortest episode we've ever done. But it will still probably be longer than the movie we're going to watch. because the movie we're going to watch is only 25 minutes long, which would feel like cheating, and I'm truly taking the piss with my determination to get, short run times with my choices. Maybe my next choice is going to go against that completely.
What, you're going to choose the extended Lord of the Rings trilogy?
I'm going to choose Titanic, or maybe The Great Escape. So but it is a film. It was classed as a film, and it is, if the rules are nostalgic memories,
Yep.
there isn't a TV show, it's a movie, so I'm going to pick The Snowman, which is a 25-minute animated film that's certainly big in the UK, airs every year, usually on Channel 4. I don't know how big it is in the US or anything.
It is a British institution. It has been over in the US, and it is...
Yeah.
It has been seen over there. So much so that I think they originally... The reason, I guess we're going to talk about it, but the reason the David Bowie intro exists is because they were trying to give it some pizzazz for the American audience.
I forgot that. I forgot there's a version with a David Bowie intro.
Yeah.
We just never watched that version. But I think that's the version that even airs in the UK and stuff now.
No, there's like, I think there's like 3 intros to that. Well, I guess we'll come to it next week. We'll talk about it. But we'll get to my circumstances for the version I always saw. But yeah, so we're doing The Snowman next, Dan. So it will be a shorter 100% on board. But it is a British institution. It's a classic. I mean, I guess in America their equivalent would be like either the Charlie Brown Christmas special or some of those Rankin Bass stop motion.
No, I think their equivalent is the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah, that's why that's what the Rankin Bass one is.
Oh right, sorry, I just said.
I love that you interrupted me to say the thing I was saying.
Mate, you think you've never done that?
It's a very good point. Yeah, like so the Rankin Bass ones, which they most famously they did Frosty the Snowman, but they also did Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which I think between those two, depending on what era you grew up in America, those are like their sort of like classic TV sort of shorts that they would watch at Christmas. I love the music from that Charlie Brown one. That Charlie Brown one has one of the most amazing songs ever written for a Christmas anything. It's spooky but Christmassy, and it feels warm and cozy, but it also feels weirdly terrifying. I don't know. There's something very beautiful and haunting about that piece of music. Anywho, we may be able to educate some of our American listeners on the UK's equivalent, I guess, our British sort of television Christmas institution, which is The Snowman, which is 25 minutes long, and I'm sure probably is easily found online. I can't imagine it's hard to dig out. I bet it's on like Amazon and stuff.
I would have thought so.
Yeah. Cool. Great.
Cool.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about, by the way, you probably know the song more than anything else. We're walking in the air. I bet that might jog people's memories more than just calling it The Snowman. So yeah, there you go. That's the one we're going.
I love though that we've like tried to justify and explain what The Snowman is. We must never forget we did an episode on Quick Change.
We must never forget. Never forget. All right. Well,
Cool.
Thanks very much for watching, everyone.
Yep. I'm Chris Billingham.
I'm Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.